2% of the population, it's a very simple business. 2% of the population causes 90% of the crime. So when you start decimating that 2%, boom, that's why we have to, it's an amazing number when you think.
This is a preschool, you stupid motherfuckers!
2% of the population.
Illegal migrants, Venezuelan gang members, found being supported, kept and hidden in a federal judge's house for protection. So what I'm starting to ask myself, what is the agreement that y'all have with these migrants? Because these are the same people that was over here burning American citizens in trains. These are also the same people that was over here that y'all was supplying luxury hotels to while your own American citizens was living on the streets. The border been a red flag. And now this? But Micah 3:11 warned us that this country leaders judge for a bribe, meaning money. And her priests only teach for a price. Man, I keep telling us, it don't matter how much weight we think we got in our little titles and position. God is snatching the cover off of anything that's corrupt. And he has moved in the courthouse to let us know what's really going on. A federal judge housing migrants, Venezuelan criminal gang members. Man.
2% of the population.
All right, the crime conversation is deranged right now, like truly deranged and totally detached from reality. So there's this just sort of sense that stalks all the coverage that, like, everyone knows conventional wisdom, like crime goes up under liberals, it's the bleeding heart liberals and the Democrats, and then crime goes up and it goes down to Republicans when they're tough and they crack down, and like that's just the way things work. That's the overriding narrative in the country. At the national level, crime, homicide, and then violent crime spiked by a huge amount under Donald Trump in 2020. And based on provisional data in 2023, we're going to see the largest one-year drop in homicides in recorded American history, an enormous drop in violent crime. And again, all this data is provisional right now, but it looks like it'll be the second or third year in a row of a drop in crime. Here's my question to you. If it were the reverse, if it were the opposite, if last year we saw the single biggest spike in violent crime in recorded history, do you think you'd know about that? Do you think you'd heard of that as opposed to how many people have heard about what I just said?
God, I've been wanting to do this video for so long. I'm going to definitively destroy a left-wing talking point right now. And listen close, because they try to use this trick all the time, and I'm going to give you the tools to absolutely obliterate this argument. They love to say that red states have the highest crime rates, but what they never tell you is where the crime is actually happening. Take Arkansas, for instance. They say it's a Republican state, but the problem is that the crime's coming from Little Rock, which is a Democrat-ran city that's long struggled with violent crime. Then they'll say, what about Tennessee? Without telling you it's actually Memphis, another Democrat-run city where the numbers are through the roof. And then they'll say Mississippi without telling you it's actually Jackson, another one ran by Democrats that is one of the highest murder rates in America. Then they'll say Alabama without telling you that it's Birmingham, another Democrat-ran city where violence runs rampant. So no, it's not conservative policies causing the chaos. It's Democrat-led cities inside of those red states driving the crime stats. They blame the state to cover for the fact that it's the cities that they run. Do your homework.
2% of the population, 2% of the population, 2% of the population causes 90% of the crime.
They blame the state to cover for the fact that it's the cities that they run. Do your homework.
Causes 90% of the crime. Causes 90% of the crime. Causes 90% of the crime.
Oh, okay. So Democrats have been in control in Virginia for like 10 minutes, and they're introducing a bill to end the minimum sentences for rape, manslaughter, and CP. That's, it's kind of a weird priority, don't you think?
Here's another prime example of what the Republicans or those on the right try to do, because when you first see that message, you think, wow, that's crazy. I can't believe that Virginia would do such a thing. And for those that don't know how mandatory minimum sentencing actually goes, let's take Virginia for an example, because they are trying to get rid of the mandatory minimum sentencing. For manslaughter, the mandatory minimum sentencing is 1 year. So when you go to court and let's say you get found guilty of manslaughter, the judge says that they are going to be following the mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines. That means you get between 1 and 20 years, meaning all you have to technically do is 1 year and then you get released back into the public. So when it comes down to those child sex offense charges and everything, the mandatory minimum sentence is between 5 and 20 years. So that's for your first offense, meaning all you have to do is 5 years and then you could get released. And then your second offense, if you're a repeat offender, the mandatory minimum sentence is between 10 and 15 years, meaning all you'd have to do is 10 years and you could potentially get released. So what Virginia is technically trying to do is remove the mandatory minimum sentencing, meaning they don't have to go by those standard laws. They don't need to follow the mandatory minimum sentencing, meaning you don't have to do 1 year and get released. The judge can go a lot higher than just a single year. Let me know your thoughts.
American people hate politics because the American people don't care if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're an independent, whether you vote or you don't. They want the Epstein files and they want justice and accountability. And they don't give a damn whether or not it's Democrats or Republicans or who is implicated. They want accountability. And that is what the survivors are asking us for. They are asking us to do our jobs, to make good on the promises that we made them when they came and met with us, and to actually, in good faith, conduct an investigation. Now, I always think it's important to pull back the curtain for the American people about what happens in these committees. And I was not shocked and surprised, but I think it's important to note that when I stepped out of the committee a few moments ago, the press were huddled on the Republican side of this committee room to take statements from the Republicans. They're not out in the kind of like neutral area. They're standing outside the Republican door so that after this vote is taken, our Republican colleagues can walk out and make a statement to the press. Now, I think that that's important to note for the public here, because this is not about true accountability. Because if this was actually about getting to the bottom of this case and actually holding individuals accountable for the crimes that were committed by Jeffrey Epstein, by Ghislaine Maxwell, by the associates, and the many, many people who are implicated in this case, what would be happening right now in this committee is that Pam Bondi and DOJ officials would be sitting right there on the witness panel answering questions under oath. Because they are breaking the law. They are not complying with our subpoena. They are not complying with the Epstein Transparency Act. And on the day, the final deadline, that they were supposed to release their final explanation about why they may have redacted some files, and in fact they have, as has been stated many times, only released less than 1% of the files, Donald Trump used the United States military to invade a foreign country and steal their oil. And while we're sitting here and our colleagues are trying to create a spectacle for the media, every single newspaper in the United States and the world's headline is about how Donald Trump right now is in Europe embarrassing the United States. How he is threatening our NATO allies to invade Greenland. Humiliating the United States. And I have to say, I was home over the weekend for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebrations to honor the life and legacy of Dr. King. And the question that I got over and over again from my constituents is what is in those files that is so bad that President Trump is invading Venezuela, threatening our NATO allies, and sending thousands of armed paramilitary troops onto our streets to create violence and chaos in American cities. That is what the American people are actually asking us. And so I will be honest, Mr. Chairman, I am deeply troubled that the individuals who are the subject of today's hearing did not appear on their scheduled date. No one is above the law. But I do know, based on the correspondence, that they have been corresponding with you regularly to try to resolve this issue. But I don't believe that's what this hearing is actually about. Because if it was actually about getting justice and about getting the truth, we would have DOJ here. We would be holding Pam Bondi in contempt, and we would be hearing from the survivors themselves.
It's a very simple business. 2% of the population.
So we had an appeals court reject the Justice Department's push to arrest Don Lemon. Then we had a judge decline to approve the criminal complaint against Don Lemon. But that didn't stop the federal agents from arresting Don Lemon. So MAGA, what part of the law and order is that? I'm just trying to remember, what part of the law and order is ignoring the courts and judges? Which is not the first time that we've seen this. I'm just trying to figure out what part of the law and order is just do what you want to do, irregardless of what the law or the Constitution says. What part of law and order in that? And Pam Bondi, what part of Pick Me is this, where you personally want to go out on a limb and say, yes, I ordered the arrest that the judges did not approve? I mean, how do you think this ends for you? Do you see what Kristi Noem is going through right now? What's wrong with y'all?